that's really exciting. I'm very, very honored to introduce our next speaker, Angie Leek. Here in Northwest Arkansas, Angie is I would say, the original expert on psychedelics for our area. She's been alone and pioneering for a very long time to prepare the ground for what's been happening. Angie is a transpersonal psychotherapist, Somatic Experiencing Practitioner, and Level 1 IFS therapist with over 25 years of clinical experience. She specializes in spiritually informed somatic therapy, grounded in trauma-informed care, and is passionate about sharing her knowledge through teaching and mentorship. In her private practice, Holos Counseling, she focuses on ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, psychedelic integration, and clinical supervision. As founder and clinical director of the Holos Collective, Angie offers consultation, training, and retreats within a collaborative, community-based model. She also founded the Holos Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to increasing financial access to healing and training pathways for psychedelic medicine in Northwest Arkansas. She serves as lead therapist and consultant for a psychedelic clinical trial site in Northwest Arkansas and was a core faculty instructor and advisor for Psychedelics Today's Vital program. A graduate of CIIS, Angie has trained with MAPS and DMA-assisted psychotherapy program, the Ketamine Training Center, Polaris, and Fluence. She has worked with both 5-MeO-DMT and N-DMT in clinical trial settings. Her passion for this work is rooted in lived experience, a personal psycho-spiritual crisis, and encounters with non-ordinary states of consciousness catalyzed her search for alternative approaches to mental health. And ultimately, it had led her to transpersonal psychology. Outside of her clinical work, Angie enjoys inner exploration, gardening, spending time in nature, and with her family. Let's welcome Angie Leek.
Wow, thank you, Beth. And thank you, Jessica, Jake, and Joseph, and Aaron, and all of the Decrim Nature crew. What a wonderful event. And it's nice to not be alone here today. So, there we go. I also want to honor all of my teachers and those that have come before me in this work. And before we begin, I would like us all to just take a breath together and settle. This is for me as much as it is for y'all. But feel your feet on the ground. And check in with the part of you that brought yourself here today. Curious, open, seeking connection, inspired to help create change. Yeah, and I just want to take a moment to say we're here doing this right now. Wow. And while I fix my screen, we'll take just a moment of silence to honor the sacredness of this conversation.
Try to unplug it and plug it
Wait. Okay, we're back. I'm not going to go over my bio again. Thank you, Beth. But yes, all those things, and I'm more than that. I'm more than all these things. I'm also me. I'm here. Let's see, where else? So, yeah, my first public talk on this topic was in 2017 at the Fayetteville Public Library, and some of you in this room were there then as well. So, welcome back. Good to see you. And I've attended over 20 psychedelic conferences nationally and internationally, and I was honored to speak at Psychedelic Science representing the Heartland in Denver last month. I love seeing what comes from these events, and I love being here with y'all today, seeing our local psychedelic ecosystem blossoming. So my talk today is rooted in both professional knowledge and lived experience. So as I move through the content, if you find yourself activated by what I'm sharing, remember to breathe, remember to feel your feet on the floor. Yeah. So, transpersonal psychology is a branch of psychology that recognizes the spiritual dimension of the human experience. It includes, but goes beyond, the personal biographical narrative, an individual's lived experience in this lifetime, and it explores expanded states of consciousness, the mystery of what happens before we're born and after we die, and our relationship to this mystery. And it involves our innate human drive towards healing and wholeness. So before we go further, I want you to reflect, not intellectually, but from your own personal lived experience. We've all suffered, every one of us. We've all had moments, situations, or maybe seasons of pain that felt absolutely overwhelming. So I'll ask you to consider, when you suffer, what do you do? Where do you go? How do you cope? Do you reach out to a friend or a loved one? Do you crave or reach out for a substance? Do you cry out to God seeking support or begging for mercy? Or maybe you fantasize about the ultimate relief, believing that ending your life ends that struggle. Or maybe you notice when things are too much, you pull away. You dissociate, avoid, disconnect, compartmentalize. None of these are wrong. They're adaptations. They're part of how we survive and how we cope. But maybe you've also noticed that relief is usually transient. Or what if that fantasy of the ultimate relief doesn't really stop it? And what we push down doesn't disappear. What gets split off becomes shadow. And later, that shadow longs to emerge. If we're lucky, this emergence becomes part of our healing, a reorganization, a reclaiming, a reconnection. And that's where transpersonal psychology offers something so vital, a framework that sees it differently. So, like so many of you that have spoken already today, we can really look at this a different way. When we reach the edge of our ability to cope, something calls us to the beyond ourselves. We cross a threshold, a doorway opens. And if we support that process and allow it to emerge, we might find ourselves integrating into a larger, more whole expression of our true self. Just real briefly, this term holotropic means towards wholeness, towards healing. So if I cut myself or scrape myself, I might need to clean out the debris or put some antibiotic ointment on, or maybe even I need stitches, but generally there's a healing impulse that comes from within. So we can apply this to our psyches as well. And what I've just outlined isn't abstract for me. It's personal. My own journey into this work didn't start in graduate school. It actually started well before I was born. My great-grandfather lost his struggle with suffering. He died by suicide and left my grandfather, a teenager at the time, an orphan. One might imagine the pain of loss to have been too much for my grandfather to bear, but somehow he endured. And he lived a very full life, full of meaning, purpose, and love. And I inherited that legacy. Knowing him to be a beloved band director and a damn good Christian. He probably wouldn't have cussed, though. But I never knew the nature of his loss. He never spoke of it, ever. My dad said his father never once in his entire life told him how his father actually died. The truth remained tucked tightly away in the shadow, just like this picture shows. And then fast forward to 1980 something. Actually, this was 70 something with my crocheted pants. But in 1981, when I was 7, my best friend was tragically killed by a drunk driver, and it shattered my sense of reality. How could she be alive one day and gone the next? I questioned what was real and safe about existing, and I didn't have the tools or the language to make sense of it. Meanwhile, the adults in my life, my parents and hers, were also profoundly impacted by her death. In their overwhelm, they were not able to support me in riding the waves of my grief. There was nothing in the world around me that knew how to hold that kind of pain. And I remember sitting in my bedroom alone and freshly reeling from the news. I was distinctly aware that I was dissociated and could not feel my feelings. Everyone else was crying. Why wasn't I? And I found myself talking to God, ? Not in a religious, dogmatic way, but in a raw, instinctive way, reaching up and out towards something beyond my 7-year-old self. God, I asked, almost matter-of-factly, so if Erin's in heaven now and she's 7, when I die, however old I'm going to be when that happens, can I be 7 again so we can play? It was a profound moment of reaching beyond the limits of my individual self towards a transcendent force to help me make sense of something that otherwise was just too much. And that moment didn't resolve the pain, but that longing for support and for meaning making pulled me in the direction towards transcendence. For many years after, I was chronically sad, depressed, one might say. My friend was gone, and my trust in the universe was shattered. It was a hard reality to accept. Several years later, a suburban teenager, I had a random opportunity to try LSD. Without an ounce of proper preparation, attention to set and setting, or support, but with a curiosity and an opportunity that met my teenage self at just the right place and the right time. Sure, I said, why not? What is this? The experience I had was unmistakably profound. I saw beauty I couldn't explain, felt a vastness I don't have words for. There was a rightness to the universe that I felt connected to that made more sense than anything else had in a long, long while. Through the subsequent years, I noticed a pattern, a correlation. Every time I had an opportunity to trip, I felt better for some time after, refreshed, reset, relieved. And if we were measuring, I'm sure my depressive symptoms improved. They were also glimpses into the transpersonal, connecting me to the creative life force and healing intelligence that lived just beyond the veil of what was available to my ordinary consciousness. But I also didn't have the support to integrate what I experienced. Like so many of us, I experienced those journeys in relative secrecy, often solo or sometimes socially, always hoping to stay out of trouble. It was usually fine, but sometimes really hard. I carried the unprocessed grief, the inherited trauma, and parts of myself and my ancestors that I'd never taught to welcome and still didn't really know how to process. And as I got older, all of that began to rise to the surface. While in college, I began exploring practices like meditation and yoga, and my inner light became ignited in non-medicine ways. At the same time, I had also begun taking SSRIs to treat my depression, and the dose kept getting increased every time those symptoms didn't fully resolve. I was taking a really high dose, and the side effects, including insomnia, were becoming problematic. A perfect storm of all these factors, plus a painful breakup. And boom, I broke. The pain of my broken heart touched me in the same place where the wounds of my grief laid dormant. And through that opening, the infinite life and love of the universe flowed through me. What happened next was beautiful and healing and full of awe. I experienced a unit of consciousness and felt transcendent of time. I felt connected to everything, everywhere, all at once. And I felt I was healing from generations before and seeing the hope of the future that I didn't know yet would come. I was 7 again, and 51, and infinity. And I still am. And so are y'all. All the parts I had pushed away or split off, and perhaps even pain that came before me, came up for healing, asking to be seen. It was chaotic, it was messy, and it was also profoundly sacred. The fire of the inner healer emerged and burned down everything else that was in its way. Eventually, I truly became undone. After some time in this non-ordinary state, I was hospitalized. Unfortunately, against my will, and my healing process, in an attempt to support or stabilize, was medicated and suppressed. To the outer observer, rightfully so, I really could use some help. And the hospital admitted me with an admitting doses of psychosis, NOS, meaning this looks like psychosis, but we don't really know, and also polysubstance abuse after I admitted having done psychedelics and other things. I was told I would need to take medicine for the rest of my life. I resisted and argued and was given more medicine until I surrendered. I broke again, but this time it was my spirit or my will. Okay, what do I need to do to get out of here? So I stopped pushing back, and I vowed silently to never, ever go through anything like that ever again. And that artwork is from when I was in the hospital. And if you look really close, there's actually googly eyes in the middle. So this was how I felt. And this love was flowing through me and healing. And there's glitter on the outer realms. Anyway, I still have this, by the way. So it would be 5 years until I stumbled on a book by Stan and Christina Groff, and I learned about this established framework that helped me make sense of and named what I experienced. The term spiritual emergency is used to describe these and other types of healing crises, a crisis of transformation, when the pace of change is overwhelming and destabilizing. Their work also showed that with proper support and sometimes containment, if allowed to run its course, these episodes would generally resolve organically, often with people finding their way to a healthier and more integrated and organized state of being. Finding this framework gave me a new understanding, and when I found out that Stan was a professor at CIS, I basically made a beeline to San Francisco to start my graduate education. I somehow had no idea that he was also one of the earliest and most prolific LSD researchers from the 50s and 60s. So you may be wondering, what does all this have to do with psychedelics? And I would say both spiritual emergencies and psychedelics can catalyze powerful and sometimes disorienting experiences of consciousness expansion, ego dissolution, and inner reorganization. Psychedelics often accelerate this process, surfacing unconscious material, unresolved trauma, and mystical or numinous experiences. And indeed, that can be overwhelming, especially without the right preparation, support, and integration. So going into just a few of these terms here, the term psychedelic comes from the Greek psyche, which most people say means mind. It actually literally translates to soul. So and then delios, meaning to reveal. So when we talk about psychedelics, we're talking about substances that reveal what is already within. Our unprocessed material, our inner truth, our inner wisdom, and the divine. The word entheogen means manifesting the divine within. And it's a term used to honor the sacred use of these substances across cultures, not as a form of escape or as drugs of abuse, but as a spiritual technology, medicines that help us remember who we really are. Yeah, and I'm editing for the sake of time here, but I think it's noteworthy that when the ego dissolves too quickly, or when the system is flooded with insight without integration, it can leave people raw, overwhelmed, or untethered. And this is why the setting, context, container, and support are really just as important as the substance itself. It's not the medicine alone that heals, it's the relationship with the medicine, and often the support of a compassionate witness. And this is why I do believe there is a time and a place for these experiences to be held within a system of care of an informed therapist, counselor, or the like. Across time and culture, these medicines have been used to initiate, to heal, to connect with ancestors and spirit. And as we bring them back into our collective awareness, we must do so not just through clinical protocols, but with reverence, with humility, with a willingness to listen to those that have gone before us, and a willingness to find the courage to navigate the brave and difficult hero's journey of returning to our wholeness. So after some really promising, from ancient to modern history, psychedelics eventually found their way into Western scientific spaces. And after years of promising research, the Controlled Substances Act placed psychedelics on Schedule I, not because they were proven harmful, but because they were politically inconvenient. This law, which remains in effect today, contradicted the existing data, claiming that psychedelics had no medical value and a high potential for abuse. The subsequent war on drugs is not about science, and it's not about your safety. It's about control, and it's about suppression of the shadow, and it's an abuse of power that has caused undue harm to so many. We're here today to continue the efforts of so many others who are working to change that. People should not be punished for trying to heal. And say it with me all, no one should be going to jail for this.
No one should be going to jail.
So these laws need to change. And one strategy to do this was devised by Rick Doblin, the founder of MAPS, to bring these medicines through the FDA approval process, conducting rigorous clinical research to prove medical value, which would force the rescheduling of these compounds. They've pioneered this paradigm-shifting work for nearly 40 years in an effort to reduce harm, reduce criminalization, establish safety methodology, and ultimately increase accessibility. Their trailblazing work laid the foundation for the modern renaissance of psychedelic research. So we find ourselves in a really interesting time. This is a bullseye of all of the psychedelic clinical trials that are underway, from preclinical research, and then as you get closer to the bullseye, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And then the red is FDA approval. We only have Spravato in there, which I have some feelings about. But anyway, lots and lots is coming. And zooming in a little closer so you can see in more detail. And then this is just, you don't have to read all that, but these are all the conditions that are being studied. Basically everything. And there's a whole nother talk on why they work as sort of a master key. You can probably apply them to just about anything. But anyway, here we are. And all of this research is helping people learn the truths about these healing tools. That truth is coming through mainstream media and stimulating conversations. More and more people are having experiences and telling their friends. And we've all read Michael Pollan's book. Maybe your grandma is microdosing. Or maybe your children, as they come of age, don't have to hide their curiosity and will know who to talk to and how to be safe if the opportunity arises for them to explore their own consciousness. But let's be honest, some of the most profound moments of healing can't be quantified. They don't fit neatly into outcome measures or diagnostic categories. There are no biomarkers for soul retrieval. The scientific community calls this the hard problem of consciousness. We just can't afford to reduce these experiences to data points alone. Some other challenging layers to psychedelic clinical research are the placebo, the double blind, the expectancy bias. So, I mean, let's just be real. It's pretty obvious. So as James Fadiman said, like, we just need to find other ways to design these studies. So another thing is, MAPS worked on bringing MDMA through since 1986. Okay, that's almost 40 years. I was trying to find out the cost of the whole thing. All I found was a cost estimate as of 2017, and only for phase 3, which cost them $25 million, which they raised 100% philanthropically. I know another 43 million came to finish it, but I don't know the total. It's a lot, and that's a lot of time. And meanwhile, I mean, you don't have to raise your hands, but if you've ever done MDMA, I don't need all that data to convince me that it's helpful for healing. So anyway, the injustice of this is just intolerable. We must explore other ways. I forgot to mention the therapist is an uncontrolled variable. It's really hard to standardize therapy and space holding. So what I'm going to suggest, how am I doing on time? I'm almost done. So I think what we need is integration. Integration of spirituality into psychology. We need what's useful about the rigor of science and the artful use of medication and the wisdom of the soul. We need trauma-informed containers that are strong, steady, and relational enough to hold people through turbulent transformations. And we need these pathways to be truly accessible, not just for those who can afford to travel abroad, but for anyone seeking healing. And beyond access, we need integrity. Because going through a medical model doesn't guarantee safety. It's not enough to have protocols, licenses, or credentials. Facilitators must also do their own inner work. They need to know their shadow so they don't unconsciously act it out in moments of transference, or when they're tired, or when they're overwhelmed, or when they're triggered. And when someone is in a vulnerable, expanded state, interactions with another person can be just as impactful as the medicine itself. The power of suggestibility when someone is in an altered state must be taken into account and managed. This work calls for deep maturity, not just skill, but presence, not control, but care. The best facilitators aren't surgeons, they're midwives. They don't force healing, they accompany it. They bear witness to the natural unfolding. They hold steady and say, keep going, you got this. Yeah, so all of this brings us to a fundamental truth, one that sits at the hearts of this work, and that's cognitive liberty. A basic human right to explore our own consciousness, to think, to feel, to heal on our own terms. It's the freedom to navigate our own relationship with mind, body, soul, with sovereignty, and with agency. But for many of us, that freedom has not always been our right. When I was hospitalized in my 20s, it was a violation of this human birthright, one that I've been working on healing and integrating for over 30 years. I share that not because it's unique, but because it's common. Too many people, especially those in spiritual crisis or those from marginalized communities, are met with force when what they need is care. Their emergence is treated as pathology, or their attempts to heal are punished with incarceration. Cognitive liberty means honoring the right of each person to seek healing in ways that align with their own truth. And when people are given sovereignty, support, and respect, we will often find our way home. Healing happens not just in clinics, but in communities, in nature, or in our deep inner space. Let's create new systems of care and broader legal pathways. So back to my vow, there has got to be a better way. We've pathologized too much. We've criminalized too many people who are trying to heal. We've built systems that suppress this natural process and the tools that might be guiding someone towards wholeness. Grief, rage, dissociation, they're signs of survival. They're responses to pain, to violations, to disconnection, to unmetabolized life experience. And we need a model of care that makes room for these messy feelings and for the mystery. We need clinicians and guides who know how to hold space, not just offer tools or follow protocols, who know how to witness without trying to manage, who understand that the healing doesn't come from fixing, it comes from being with. That better way is already here. It's in relationship, it's in community, it's in trauma-informed, spiritually integrated care that respects the complexity of the human experience. It's in sacred medicines, it's in ceremony, it's in story, and it's in the deep listening that helps people feel seen. But our systems and our laws are outdated and in need of updating. So it's not about throwing out science in the medical model. There are benefits to skilled support, to the scientific rigor, and even the artful use of medication. It's about expanding and integrating spirituality into our framework of care. Let us include and transcend this outdated system and reach towards something greater. So I'll leave you with an invitation and a Bitmoji that's inspired by the artwork from when I was in the hospital. What will you do to help cultivate new models within our existing systems of care, one that honors cognitive liberty and begins to uncouple from our systems rooted in power and profit? How will you help cultivate systems rooted in connection rather than control? A model that holds space for the unfolding of the mystery and that honors the intelligence of our innate inner wisdom. Let us decriminalize the sacred, and let us tend to the structures of support that hold people when they return from the edge. Let us remember that healing doesn't happen in isolation. It's embedded in relationships and in communities that we live in. It doesn't belong to a system alone. It belongs to all of us. May we be the ones to make that shift together.
Thank you, Angie. We have time for a question or two, maybe. What would you say a bit about your thoughts on the societal and ancestral wounds in regards to the suppression of psychedelic experience by the various institutions of control?
Yeah. Well, for one, a lot of people that I work with come to me with a lot of shame and a lot of fear, and it's something they've hidden, they've been judged for, and that's internalized. Am I bad? Am I wrong? But I think if we go out a step further and look at our whole culture, keeping them illegal and relegated to the shadow also lets it fester in a way. You know, if you're doing this in an underground setting, what happens if you have an adverse experience with a facilitator? There's no licensing board to report them to, and if you say anything, you've done something illegal as well. So it just perpetuates risk and harms that can come, and it's, you know, unfortunately just set us back from opportunities to heal and to learn best practices. So we're making up for lost time.
Thank you. Is there a worry that pharmaceutical companies will be gatekeepers of access to psychedelics?
Yes. Yeah.
I just said that one.
Yeah. I mean, we still live in these systems, and yeah.
Where would you first point someone towards transpersonal psychology and archetypal work to expand their understanding of mental health, spiritual emergence, and holistic wellness?
Yeah.
Resources.
One of my root teachers is Stanislav Grof, so he's one of the early prolific writers in this topic. There are more and more of us, transpersonal therapists, learning to work this way, wanting to work this way. When I first moved here, it was like, where are the others? And now I'm sitting with like a handful of y'all in this room. So feel free to reach out. The Holos Collective is my latest project, which is to support and train therapists and to create systems of integration. So we're planning to do a lot of book clubs and workshops, you know, sharing this information. So please feel free to check out my website if you're interested.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Let's give another big, like super big round of applause for Angie.